be along this morning just to give you Argyll and Bute Council's perspective in relation to community wind farm benefit. I'll just run through the existing policy that we have, the funds that are operated within our area, the changes, I suppose, that we've seen over the last 5 to 10, maybe 15 years in some cases in relation to community benefit and funds, and how we would like your input as we develop a new framework for community benefit policy. So I'll just start. Councillor Dance has already identified the single outcome agreement as one of our key documents, and our objective there, as Councillor Dance was saying, is about growing our population. We also have our Economic Development Action Plan, which identifies renewable energy as a key sector in order to assist us in realising those objectives within the single outcome agreement. And finally, we have our Renewable Energy Action Plan, which is due for refresh this year, and that's obviously looking at how we can take that natural resource that we have, looking at all scales and all technologies, and secure an economic benefit for our communities. So this is the specific focus we have within our Renewable Energy Action Plan to secure socio-economic benefit for our communities and assist in the development of local renewable projects. At the moment, there's a number of actions that we're developing. We have our Renewable Community Fund map, which basically maps all the existing funds within the area. We've also developing through the Community Renewables Opportunity Plan, key information for communities to access through the website. We have a critical friend approach, which is about assisting, again, communities and third sector organisations about accessing either information through the council's services or wider through other organisations. And we've got information on different models of fund management. And lastly, we have the Argyll and Bute Renewable Alliance, which basically has been a key outcome from our Renewable Energy Action Plan, which is about promoting renewables in Argyll, but ensuring the correct infrastructure is in place to allow these renewable developments to come forward. So, community benefit from renewables, we're really looking to secure the best outcome for communities from funds to maximise socio-economic benefit locally from commercial renewable developments and to assist the development of community renewable projects themselves. The existing policy, again, just to emphasise the point Councillor Dance made, this is obviously a wholly voluntary process, but at the moment the policy in place from the Council is based on a £2,000 per megawatt. And just bear in mind that this was originally developed back in 2005. There's a split proposed within that policy between a local and a wider regional potential benefit, and that 40% is put through an energy in terms of delivery of renewable education across the schools in Argyll, and each project is obviously negotiated individually with communities. Separate to this, there is obviously each developer has their own policy to which they work to. So this is a framework that we have, but obviously the developers have their own specific policies, and we'll hear about some of those later on. So what do we have at the moment in Argyll? There's a varying payment rate, and you see there it's quite significant in some instances, from £117 to £2,000 per megawatt. Again, just bearing in mind that some of these wind farms that we're looking at in relation to the £117 go back to the late 1990s, and the industry has obviously moved on quite significantly since then in terms of technology and commercial viability. So on average just now, through the funds that we have coming in, we're looking at just over £1,000 per megawatt. And those are basically covered through a mix of voluntary payments and historical Section 75 agreements, which were originally attached to the planning consents for some of these developments. And there's a variety of administrative methods relating to these funds. Some are through community councils, some are through trusts, and some are through other models that we'll hear about later on today. So this map just gives you a feel for the spread of the funds at this particular point in time. So really right down from the entire peninsula up beyond into Oban and the Lower area. And the table just identifies specific individual funds, the levels of payment, and what comes in on an annual basis. And we'll see how long some of these have been coming in for. So some are back to 1999. It's quite interesting when you look at that table, the Audrey wind farm, which basically the British Community Trust have ownership of a single turbine there. You'll see their income generation from that almost equates to the total of the existing commercial wind farm funds that come in on an annual basis. So that's obviously quite an interesting point, just to see that they're earning on an annual basis the same amount of money as coming into basically 7 independent, the total of 7 independent trusts. The project supporters, and again you'll hear later from the speakers about their individual projects, but they really range in terms of scale and type, from play facilities to supporting local events, contributions to running costs for local groups, and I think in Qatar they actually contributed towards the defibrillator for the local doctor surgery. And I suppose what we're interested to hear today is why these funds are important to you as a community, and are these being used as best they could, particularly as sums of money increase. So the issues that we've been looking at in terms of reviewing the funds, as I say, the contribution per megawatt is obviously increasing substantially from that original £117 per megawatt. A lot of companies are now looking at £5,000 per megawatt. Through the CARES fund, where you have a community or a business project, I think they're also referencing £10,000 per megawatt. The capacity of the wind turbines themselves in terms of technology are substantially increasing. So you're really looking at much larger pots of money coming into communities now, and I suppose where we're interested is to see how that funding can be maximised for those communities. And looking at the different models about how we split that funding, and particularly an area that we've been looking at is that local and regional perspective. And again, we're interested to hear how people feel about that. As your sums of money coming in are potentially increasing from 24,000 per annum to, some are going to be in the region of 350, 500,000 per annum, then we're obviously keen to just see how best that funding could be distributed. This is just an example, again, just to let you see the change over time from the original existing wind farm that we have there that's referenced. That was £462 per megawatt. That was, as I say, that's quite a historical development. It's one of our earlier ones. You're now looking at £5,000 per megawatt. And again, you're looking at, it's not a huge increase in capacity on that, but some of them are quite significant. And generally, you're looking more in the region of 45 upwards megawattage. The Scottish Government have developed guidance in terms of how community benefit funds should be considered, and these are sort of the first principles, really good practice about the shape of community funds going forward. So that's not just looking at wind development, it's looking at it across all renewables. They're looking at a minimum of £5,000 per megawatt. Consideration of community investment, which is similar to the Argyll model. We've obviously stressed that community benefit funds are not linked to the planning consent and are not material planning considerations, so it's good to kind of bear that in mind. They're really encouraging us early consultations possible, and that developers identify appropriate communities to be involved in those discussions, that consultation is open, timely, fair and inclusive, and that the use of local strategic community action plans are used as a mechanism to determine how those funds are distributed within that community. We've looked at that, and in terms of our own framework going forward, again, looking at a minimum of £5,000 per megawatt. Also continuing to look at the Concordat agreements and that process of securing a wider economic benefit through partnership. Again, it would be wholly voluntary, and the individual payments would be negotiated with local communities after the consent process. From the local authority perspective, we've also got two hats, one on the planning side and one on the economic development side. And obviously we allow that planning process to run before we would be involved in detailed discussions. I think our questions for you today are about that regional, sub-regional level. If the pots of money are sufficient to allow a kind of wider regional consideration of funding, possibly does that region refer to Argyll and Bute? Would it refer to sub-regions? Would it refer to your nearest service area? And so that's one of the areas we're interested in. Looking at some of the current models in terms of the regional context, we've got delivery bodies such as Argyll Energy who are looking at developing and delivering regional information and support through renewable education, and that's working with Scottish Power Renewables. And then we've other models such as Scottish and Southern Energy Renewables. They've got a 50-50 split between local and regional, and that will apply to the Cure wind farm down in Kintyre. And then you've got the potential for communities to manage a regional grant, or alternatively another body. So that's where we're really interested to hear from you about that regional context, and also what would that cover in terms of skills and apprenticeships, jobs, etc. Community benefit options, this just lets you see some of the options there are in terms of that joint venture, equity investment, improvement to local facilities, etc. And other issues for consideration, just briefly, community plans and the role that they can have, whether you call them community action plans, whether you call them investment plans. Is that a good model in terms of a community determining how they are going to use funds, particularly where they're much larger pots of money? Good governance, obviously that's a critical consideration for any community who are going to be receiving funds as to how they set themselves up. And how that distribution is seen to be fair and transparent, and decisions are made on applications for grant funding from local communities. The options for delivery, there's obviously numerous options there. There's no right option, it will depend on each community and the capacity within that community and the best model to suit the community, and obviously that would be in discussions with your developer, and the council is obviously here to assist with that as well. In terms of council support, we're developing our renewable energy web pages to provide as much information for you as possible. There's guidance available in terms of negotiating community benefit packages. Community consultation and planning, that's really through if you're looking at a community development plan or action plan. And Margaret Fives from the council is here today, and they have a stand in the marketplace, and you'll be able to speak to them. Our social enterprise team, David Rennie, is on the camera at the moment, or behind the camera, and David will be in the marketplace, and again he can assist. And then we have the Community Renewables Opportunity Plan on the website. So thank you very much for your time. We're obviously really keen to hear your thoughts today, and there will be an opportunity at the discussion session, and the evaluation forums are there too. Thank you.